it's Thursday, and today we're making something that might seem a little bit familiar to you. So this design did originate in the How to Design No-Sew Design Patterns video, but he's gone through a little bit of an evolution since then. Okay, so you might remember seeing this little pink guide when we did the no-sew guide video a couple of weeks ago now. And I just decided that I liked his pose so much that he needed his own video. But he wasn't quite right. I still wasn't really that happy with his ears. So in the second version of him, I tried a different kind of ear and I tried some different color marks, but I still wasn't really that happy with him. The third version, I hated what happened on top of his head so much, I permanently sewn on a witch's hat. And in the fourth version, the ears weren't working out either, which brings us to the fifth version, which I managed to keep entirely no-sew, which I'm really happy with, and that is the version that we're going to be doing today. Now, in case any of you fell in love with the witch's hat, I will include the pattern for that at the end of the video as well. So for today's project, you're going to need 8-ply 100% acrylic yarn in at least one color, but I'm going to use 2 because I want to give him little white feet. You are going to need 12mm safety eyes, and yes, I am aware that these are slightly different colors, but we're just rolling with it today. You're also going to need your 3.5mm hook, a pair of scissors, and some stuffing. Now, you won't need any pins and needles today because he is entirely no-sew. A written version of this pattern will be sent out to my patrons and will also be available in my Etsy store. I will leave links to both in the description down below for anyone who's interested. All right, so to make our little cat, we're going to start by making all 4 of his legs and his tail. Now that is because when we are stitching up the body, we're going to attach them as we go. So we're going to start with his feet. We start at the little tips of the paws and then work up in rows until we hit where they're going to meet the body. So the colours on this pattern are highly customizable, so I am going to give him little white feet today, but I'm just going to make the rest in grey, and you can choose to do your colours however you prefer. So I'm starting by grabbing my white and working up the first 3 rows of the foot. So there is our magic ring of 6. In the next row, we're going to work 5 single crochet and then an increase. Now I am working an invisible increase for mine, which just means I work the first stitch of the increase through the front loop only, and the second stitch through both. So that's row 2. And then in row 3, we are going to work 6 single crochet and then an increase. Just like that. Now, just for the color markings I'm choosing to do today, I'm going to change colors in the last stitch of that increase. And just in case anybody needs to know how to change colors, what you're going to do is insert your hook into the stitch you're working into as per usual, yarn over with your existing color and pull up a loop so you are halfway through a single crochet there. Then just hold your old color out of the way, then grab a strand of the color you want to change to, pinch it at the base of your half done stitch, yarn over with it, pull through both of those loops, and you'll end up with kind of this little wibbly wobbly looking stitch, and then just give your old color a little bit of a tug to lock that stitch in place. So you'll end up with a single crochet in your old color with your new color active on your hook, ready to go. So yeah, the color changes aren't a mandatory part of this pattern, but that's just in case you need to know how to do them. So we have 3 more rows to work of this leg. So the first one is 7 single crochet around, and then an increase, like so. And then we just have 2 rows of 9 single crochet. So there we are, we're going to finish off. So that's my grey. I've still got my white attached here. I'm going to trim those off as well. Then I'm just going to tuck those 3 ends down inside the foot. We won't be stuffing the foot at this point. We're going to do that a little bit later. And I'm going to leave that tail out for now because it makes it really easy to identify where our finishing off point was, which is relevant when we go to attaching the pieces onto the belly. So there is our first little foot. Now with your finishing off stitch at the back of the piece, also mine's facing to the right, I'm just going to squish that flat, and there is our finished foot. Now you will need 4 little feet today. And my crochet magic only usually doubles things, so I'm going to try something a little bit new. Ready? And there we go. So there are our 4 little legs. Pop those to one side and we're going to work up his little tail. So the tail is just a really basic little teardrop shape, and we start at the tip of it and work back towards the base. And there is the little tail as well. So we've stuffed it. You can stuff it as firmly as you like, just make sure there's no stuffing leaking out the end or anything like that. And we're once again going to squish flat the opening to form 3 pairs of stitches, which we will use later when we go to attach it to the body. So pop that to one side. Okay, so now we've prepped all the pieces we are going to attach. We need to make the little foundation that we build the cat up from. So that is this little belly piece. So this piece is worked flat, so not in a spiral, at least to start with. And we're going to begin by chaining 4. So just like that, I'm then going to turn, and starting in the second chain from my hook, I'm going to work 3 single crochet back along those chains. Like so. I'm going to chain 1 and turn the work, and we're going to work 3 single crochet again. Chain 1 and turn. So this row starts by working 3 single crochet, which should leave you with this little square. And then we're going to chain 4. So that's what that looks like. And then we're going to turn and start in the second chain from your hook. We are going to work 3 single crochet into those chains, just like so. And then 3 single crochet into the single crochets from the previous round, like so. And then we are going to chain 4 to extend another little wing out the other side. So that's what that should currently look like. Okay, turn your work. So starting in the second chain from your hook again, we are going to work 3 single crochet into those chains, and then 6 single crochet across to the end of the row. So that's 9 single crochet in total. Like so. Chain 1 and turn, and we're going to work 9 single crochet back along that row. So there we are. Chain 1 and turn. So we have 4 rows left to go. So with this row we're going to work 6 single crochet and leave the last 3 stitches of the row unworked. Chain 1 and turn, and you're going to work 3 single crochet, leaving again the last 3 stitches of the row unworked. Chain 1 and turn, then 3 single crochet, and final chain 1 and turn, and work the last 3 single crochet. So there is our little belly piece. Note that I am not finishing off, I'm leaving that active loop on because we're going to work from here up the body. So I did go through the design process and how I arrived at these specific shapes during that how to design no-sew patterns video that came out a couple of weeks ago. So if you're interested in sort of like the why of these pieces, you should really check that out. It will give you some good theory and some background. But for now, we're going to move on to attaching our legs. Right, so on your screen at the moment, there should be a diagram. Now what this diagram does show is the cross of the belly, which you can see here off to the side, as well as how the legs are going to fit into each of the corners. Now these legs do have an orientation to them. They do slope in a specific direction, and that is back towards that stitch where we finished off. So that stitch is marked in red in the little diagram here, so that you can see kind of how we're going to orient it. But I am going to talk through each of the legs specifically today. This is just if a diagram is more useful to you. All right, get rid of that. All right, so grabbing our first little leg, we are going to identify the last single crochet we did before finishing off. So this one here, and I'm going to count 3 back from that. So 1, 2, 3. That is the first stitch we are going to attach to our belly. So we'll be stitching into the belly and the leg to attach the two pieces. So I'm going to start by inserting my hook into the next little gap around on my belly piece. And then through that fourth stitch up from the finishing off point on the leg. So just like that. And I'm going to work a single crochet through both. There we go. So I'm going to work a second single crochet down that little side and into the next stitch along on the leg. So they should be attached in 2 stitches now. We're then going to turn our belly cross and work the next 3 single crochet up the other side. So starting by inserting my hook through the next available stitch and the next available stitch on the leg as well. Work the single crochet, the next available stitch of the belly, and the next stitch on the leg should be our finishing off stitch. Work your single crochet, and then the final stitch on that side of the belly is going to be worked in the first stitch after our finishing off point on the leg. So you've worked 5 single crochet in total, and you've worked the complete little L bend of that bit of the belly. Your foot is attached by 5 stitches and you should have 4 stitches free. Now, if you look closely at the leg, you'll note that it slopes back towards the belly. That orientation is going to be used for all 4 legs. So the front legs will have this sloping to the back and the back legs will have it sloping to the front. And that's how you get kind of like this little emphasized action pose. So this first stitch for me, I am going to place into this opening that was technically used as the last joining stitch for that first leg. But it's more important for me to have 3 stitches along that side than for each stitch to have a unique opening that it's being worked into. Hopefully that makes sense. So that brings us up to the next little corner. It has 2 sides to it once again. So this side here will have 3 stitches down it, and then this side here will have 2 stitches up it. So grab your next leg. Identify once again the stitch you finished off in, and this time you're only counting 1 stitch up. So we're the second stitch away from that finishing off point, and that's going to be the first stitch we stitch into. So I'm going to insert my hook through the first opening on the belly, and then through the second stitch up from the finishing off point of the second leg, and work my single crochet. So that's 1, and we're going to work 2 more along this side, matching up those openings with a stitch on the leg. So that's that first side done, and we're going to work 2 stitches up this side of the belly and attach the next 2 stitches of the leg at the same time. So there we go, that is the second leg, and you'll see there that slope that I'm talking about. It's only very subtle, but it slopes back towards the middle. We are now going to work 3 stitches along the top before we turn, and we're going to attach our third leg. So in this little corner, we're going to work 2 stitches down and 3 stitches up. So grabbing our leg, we are going to count 4 stitches up from the finishing off point. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. So that's our first stitch there. I'm going to insert my hook through the next gap available on the belly. 1, 2, 3, 4. Through the stitch of the leg, work a single crochet. Then we've got our second stitch down that side, like so. Turn our work, and like I said, we're going to work 3 stitches, joining the next 3 stitches of the leg along this side. This all becomes a lot simpler after this row, I promise. Now, after you've finished attaching each leg, make sure that you check that there are 4 stitches available on the leg around the outside. That's important to our stitch count later. So that's our third leg attached. We are going to work 3 single crochet down this belly side. And once again, that first stitch is probably going to fall for you in the same spot it's falling for me, which is basically the other side of the little opening that we did our final leg attaching stitch in. So 1, 2, 3. And now we have our final leg, the final leg of the race. We're going to count 2 stitches up from our finishing off point. So it's this stitch here. And we're going to work 3 stitches down and 2 stitches up. like so. And then to finish off our round, we just need to work 3 single crochet along the last remaining side. So that is what your piece currently looks like. From underneath, we've got all 4 legs attached. There shouldn't be any visible openings. If you bend them, they should be pretty much attached seamlessly. And you should be able to see this sort of wobbly cross in the middle. And that's good. That's exactly what it's supposed to look like. So from here on out, we're actually going to be working around the outside only. We won't be using the 5 stitches that we used to attach the leg anymore. Now, for anyone who watched that original video, you know that I ended up having to work the little pink cat completely inside out because I forgot to change direction at this point. So don't forget to change direction at this point. We are going to chain 1 and turn our work so that the right side is now facing us. So this row starts by working 3 single crochet along that first side. So that will be the back of your cat, which brings us to our first leg. And so as I mentioned, you should have 4 stitches free around the outer edge of that leg. And we're going to work in those next. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. So that should bring you up to your first belly side. There should be 3 single crochet along that, and we're going to put a stitch into each of them. Now, just as a side note for anyone trying to design something similar to this, if you don't want your legs poking out at this little, I like this action pose, but if you didn't want them poking out this way, you would fix that by placing increases sort of at where your legs meet your belly, because it provides a little bit more room in the round, and so it's not pulling on the legs quite as much. Okay, which brings us to our second leg, and we're going to work 4 single crochet around the outside of that leg again. Now you should have done 14 stitches so far. That brings us to what will be the front of your cat, and once again we're going to work 3 single crochet across that little opening. So leg number 3, put 4 single crochet around the outside of it. 3 single crochet across the second side of the belly. And then 4 single crochet around the outside of the final leg. So this should leave you with a round that is 28 stitches in total. So what we're going to do at this point is just to make it a little easier to work with, is I'm going to take the tails of each of my legs and tuck them down inside. Just makes for a neater workspace. And then we're going to take a little bit of stuffing and stuff each of these legs as well. You can stuff them quite full, but make sure they don't overflow or it'll make the next round of stitches kind of tricky. And there we go. So we still have our tail that isn't attached. We're not going to attach that for a couple of rows yet, so keep that off to one side. Okay, so before we get started on the next row, you'll see that we've got like this little kind of square opening because of the fact that we chained 1 and turned. Just make sure that you're working your first stitch of the next row, which is a single crochet, into the correct location. So there is a tiny little opening there, but you will not notice it once we finish making the rest of the rows. Or if it's bothering you, you can use a needle and a little bit of yarn to stitch it shut, but it shouldn't be a big deal. So that's the first stitch of the row, and we're going to work 4 rows of 28 single crochet around. And just like that, which brings us back to the back of our cat, and in the next row we're going to be attaching his tail. So start by working a single crochet. So that should leave your next 3 stitches pretty much centered between those 2 back legs. Now if you find yours is just a little bit off to one side or the other, you can add or remove 1 to 2 single crochet along this row to move it slightly, but any more than that I would strongly encourage you to go back and check your row counts. So I'm going to grab my tail, and we've already squished this opening flat, so we have 3 pairs of stitches, and we're going to line those 3 pairs of stitches up on the outside of our piece so that they match up with the next 3 stitches of our body. And I'm going to work 3 single crochet, each through a pair of the stitches and a stitch of the body. So that's 1, so we're working those stitches through all 3 layers. So that's the next pair of stitches and the final pair of stitches. So then we are going to work 10 single crochet to reach the front of our cat. So that brings us around to the front of our cat. So we are going to be building out this little under jaw piece. So if you are using a different color for your cat's belly and sort of neck floof, you would make this all in your belly color at this point. I'm making mine in gray for simplification purposes. So what we're going to do is work some short rows to build out this little ledge. So we start by working 7 single crochet across, just continuing that previous row. Which should bring you to the far corner of what we would arguably call the front of the piece. So like you'll note that that row goes all the way across. We are then going to chain 1 and turn, and working back into the stitches we just did, I'm going to put an increase, then 6 single crochet, and then an increase. So at this point, you should stop and check that this little ledge is facing the direction you want your head to face. If it's crooked at this point, your cat's going to be looking off in the wrong direction. Chain 1 and turn, and then working again back along the stitches we just did, we're going to put an increase, then 8 single crochet, and then an increase. Chain 1 and turn, and then we're going to work 2 decreases, so 1 and 2, 4 single crochet across, and then 2 decreases, chain 1 and turn, and then we're going to work 4 decreases across. So that is what your little ledge should look like. That's from the top, from the side, from underneath. You might find that yours bends upwards naturally. That's fine. We're going to try and encourage it to sit fairly flat, but it's going to end up on an angle, what we want. It's fine. So that is the end of our short rows. And now what we're going to be doing is working a row the whole way around the outside of this piece. So that starts with us turning and putting 4 single crochet down the edges of our rows. It's 4. You're then going to put 7 single crochet around to the back of your cat. Then we're going to work a decrease, a single crochet, and then 3 decreases, and then 4 single crochet, which should bring you back to the other side of your short rows. So see here, the next stitches we're going to place up the other side of those edges, and we're going to put 4 single crochet up, which leaves us with those 4 stitches that were the final short row. And in them we're going to put a single crochet in the first one, and then in the next 2 we're going to build out a little bit of a nose. Now in my pattern that I'm showing today on screen, I'm going to put 3 stitches in each of them. You should know that if you want a more pronounced snout, you can actually put like 4 or 5 stitches in each of these. And then in the next row, when I single crochet 3 together, if you did 4 or 5 in this row, you would just single crochet 4 or 5 together, and you would get a little bit more of a pronounced snout. So there's my 3, and I'm doing that into the next 2 stitches. So 3 stitches into each of those, and then a final single crochet to finish the row. There we go. Okay. So So it should all be starting to look a little bit more feline to you now. So we have 5 rows to go before we're ready to start making the ears. And most of that will be focused on putting decreases at the back to create this little slope, while keeping the head moving upwards so that it has a little bit of bulk to it. So be expecting a lot of decreases to fall in the small of the back. So there we are at the end of the head. So from here on out, we'll be working up 2 ears in this little opening that we've left at the top. But first, we are going to stop, position our eyes, and stuff his little body as well. So I'm going to do our eyes next. So just because it's too hard to count really up from anywhere, it's a little bit wibbly wobbly. If you need a little guide of how to put the eyes in, what you should do is count 4 squares down from your current opening. So just to be clear, we're not counting those loops as separate from the little square underneath. We're just counting 4 squares down. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. And if you remember where we did those 3 single crochets in the same stitch and then the single crochet 3 together stitches, that's what this little sort of lump is. You want to position your eyes on either side of that. Sorry guys, I've just adjusted my lighting there. So if you're using 12mm safety eyes like I am, you should be able to see 2 full stitches between them and snap the backs on. Now I do prefer my cat's eyes fairly low on the face, and so that's how I've positioned them. You might want to position yours further up or further out, it's up to you. Then we're just going to stuff. And you can stuff quite firmly, just make sure that you've worked that stuffing down into every corner of the piece. So I have left a little room in my head. I'm going to pop a little bit more stuffing in after we've finished off our first ear. That is basically what he should look like for you at this point. So if your legs are sitting out really flatly, you can just sort of bend them down. In fact, if you're so inclined, you could take a needle and some yarn and literally just sew them so that they were straight down if you wanted sort of a little bit more static pose. But I actually kind of really do like the leaping pose, which is why I've designed it into the piece. So now we're going to craft our first ear. So just continuing on from where we are on the head, we're going to start by working 8 single crochet around. Which should bring you to the center back. We're then going to skip the next 9 stitches. So rotating your work as though you were working into them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's the 9th stitch, and so we'll be working into this one here. So being careful to make sure you're inserting your hook from the right direction. You don't want to insert from the inside, you need it to be from the outside. There is our 9th stitch. Now I've kind of flubbed that. You see how long that loop is? I'm going to redo that so we've got a tighter join, because otherwise you'll end up with a little hole in the top of his head. There we are. See, that's better. So what that's done is split our opening into 2 openings basically that we can work into, and we're going to use this one now to build the first ear. So in the next row, which is the final row of the ear, we're going to work 2 decreases, then 3 single crochet, and then a decrease. So it should leave you with 6 stitches around, and we are going to finish off. So you do still have a tiny opening at the top of that ear, and I'm just going to use the remaining yarn we have there to weave it through the front loop only of each of those stitches. So give it a little pull, which will close it. Then we're going to tuck that end down inside the head. And it'll be our little secret. So there is your first ear. And as I mentioned, I'm going to take a moment to just put a little bit more stuffing in the head. If you wanted to make a zombie cat for Halloween, you could kind of leave off at this point and just put a little bit of pink in there, make it a brain. So there we are. And now we just need to reattach and build the second ear. So I've attached my yarn to my hook with a slip knot. And then we're going to just take a really good look at our opening. So there should be 9 stitches left. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9, right? We can ignore anything that is this existing ear. So with the tail of the cat facing you, identify the first free stitch and then the second stitch. And that second stitch is the one we are going to join in. So this one here. So we've got 1 free stitch left closest to that ear, and we're joining in our second one. Now I'm joining with a standing single crochet, but you can also slip stitch, chain 1, and then single crochet over the top of it to get the same effect. So there is our first stitch, and we're going to work 7 single crochet around until we reach the last available stitch. So there we go. So that is 8 stitches worked in total, including our joining stitch. Tuck the little end away inside. So there's only 1 available stitch left to work into, which is back in the stitch before we started. And we are going to, inserting our hook from the outside of the piece, work a single crochet into that one next. So it's basically skipping the whole first ear that we made to close the loop off on this side. So that should leave you with 9 available stitches to work into. Hopefully I've kept my fingers out of the way enough that you can see. And we're going to finish this ear off with a final row like we did the first time, this time working 3 single crochet and then 3 decreases. And finish off, leave a little bit of a tail, because this tail has 2 jobs to do. So first off, we're going to use it once again to close off the opening at the top of the ear, same way we did with the first ear. So this time, instead of pulling it away to elsewhere in the head, what I'm going to do is you'll see that there's this very slight little opening between those ears. So I'm going to tuck my hook up inside that first ear and just pull that strand out into that little opening. And then use my hook to weave it. You could close this off with a needle as well, but I'm just going to instead pull that little tail through and wrap it around a couple of times just to make sure that that little gap is going to stay shut. And then tuck whatever's left away down into the head. There we go, that's wrapped 3 times. So we tuck it away. So there is your little kitten. Now you can absolutely stop at this point. You could use a little bit of yarn to emphasize the facial features if you wanted to, which I might do in a minute. And for anybody who wanted the instructions on making the little witch's hat, they are on the screen for you right now. So the opening of that hat should fit, don't get me wrong, snugly, because you want it to stay on, but it will fit over the top of those ears to make your cat into a little witch's familiar. And I also took the liberty of making a little witch's broom, which I might also stitch in place. Just there. There we are. So there is your finished cat. I hope you had fun making them with me today. You'll have to let me know what colors you're going to be making your kittens in. And also let me know if you like the witchy familiar version or if you like just the plain kitten. And there is a close-up look of the little face that we made. All right, so that's it for today. Don't forget to leave your suggestions for the next Not My Idea video in the comment section down below. But other than that, I will see you next week. Okay, bye.